Hey everybody, it's Chad from NatureBox Pet Emporium, and today we're going to be talking about chameleons, so stay tuned. So we appreciate you watching your videos. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, share it with a friend. Your grandma would love chameleon videos, and go ahead and comment below if you have any questions, comments, queries, or maybe even a concern that we can help you out with. Today we're going to be talking about chameleons and just kind of some broad conversation about them. I'm going to put this guy back since he's wanting to go. That's a Jackson's chameleon. That's one of the most iconic chameleons. They have the horns, and my running joke is, yes, that those Jacksons are always very horny, especially the males, as females typically don't have horns. But there's many different types of chameleons. Veiled chameleons, panther chameleons, those are probably the top three most popular and commonly available chameleon. And what I want to talk a little bit about today is just some of the basics of chameleon care. There's a very deep dive that we could go into about the different nuances that people have very strong opinions about, but I'm just going to give you some of the bullet points and encourage you to find what works best for you and go from there, go forth and be a successful chameleon keeper. Chameleons in general typically get a bad rap because they say that they're very hard to take care of and that if you get a chameleon, it's just going to die, so don't waste your time. Chameleons are not a good pet. I would disagree. I think chameleons are great pets, but there's some caveats to that. When people think of pet reptiles, they think of ball python, they think of leopard gecko, crested gecko, bearded dragon, etc., etc., etc. Those animals are much more forgiving in how you can keep them. A chameleon is a very specific reptile, obviously. You know, it has the zygodactyl feet, the color chromatic skin, the ballistic projectile tongue. It's a super cool, it's my favorite reptile by far, but it's one of the most specialized reptiles. And because of that, it's not as durable as a ball python or a bearded dragon or a leopard gecko, etc., etc. So when somebody has a ball python, 2 years later, they give it to a friend or something happens, maybe it passes away, and they have that snake or that enclosure for that snake tank, and they get a Jackson's chameleon and they put it in there, that animal's not going to thrive. That's where the stigma of, chameleons not being good pets or difficult to take care of comes into play. Because if you got a leopard gecko, chances are you could put that leopard gecko in the tank that you had your ball python in, and it would do pretty okay. So now that we've established that, let's talk about what you need to keep your chameleon happy as a clam. Chameleons are a arboreal species of reptile. That means they want to be vertically oriented. There are some, exceptions to that, but again, just broad bullet points here. You want taller cages. You want a cage that ideally is made from screen because that's going to give the chameleon ventilation. Because they live in the trees, there's no forest bottom, yucky, stagnant air. They're up in the top of the trees where it's always blowing. They have fresh air all the time. If you keep them in something like, just a 12-12 cube that has no ventilation or a sealed terrarium, then that air movement is not going to be there. It's going to be super duper humid. It's going to be musky. That's going to give the chameleon a respiratory infection. So you want to avoid that. A screen cage is a great way to do that. If you're in an area where you have humidity concerns or challenges like we do here in Colorado, then there's ways around that, and people will have strong opinions on using screen cages or not, but screen cages can and will work. Likewise, as glass or acrylic cages can and will work. You just have to make it work for what is best for you. What you need to put inside of your cage, whether it's a screen cage or an acrylic cage, you have to, have the appropriate decor. Again, because chameleons are arboreal and they like to live in the trees, you should try to mimic that. Make freeways for your chameleon to traverse around its cage, to be happy. Give it area for it to bask on. So you want somewhere kind of underneath the basking light. You don't want it too close so it doesn't burn itself, but you want areas directly underneath the light, as well as paths to the bottom, as well as just anywhere in there. The more surface area, the more vines, the more sticks that you put in the cage, the larger the cage will actually become because you're increasing the surface area. Once you have that done, you want to move on to your lights. You'll pretty much need 2 different lights for your chameleons. You'll need a basking light as well as a UVB light. And let me show you what those are. The UVB bulbs that I prefer to use are the T5 Reptisun 5.0 bulbs from ZooMed. This UVB bulb will broadcast, the entire distance of the cage. And when I say that, this might be a more appropriate one. So you can put this kitty corner on the top of your screen cage and it'll broadcast across the entirety of it. The importance of using a T5 bulb comes down to the projection. This bulb will project down at least 18 inches into the cage. If you use something like this mini UVB bulb here, for a chameleon, this is rather worthless. This puts out UVB bulb or UVB rays, but this bulb will only project maybe 4 inches down into your cage. So unless your chameleon is right there, it's not going to get any of the benefits of this UVB bulb. Whereas if you use this bulb, it'll project all the way down, to the bottom-ish of your cage, and it will get your chameleon exposure to UVB pretty much no matter what it is, pretty much no matter where it is. The importance of that is that the UVB helps metabolize calcium into the body of the animal. Without the UVB, the calcium that it eats is not able to be absorbed into the body, and then you'll be, dealing with metabolic bone disease, which is not ideal. The other bulb that you're going to need is a basking bulb. Basking is a tricky subject to make broad recommendations on, again, because it depends. I like the Repti basking bulbs or the daylight blue bulbs. Those are both great options, but then you have to drill down to what wattage. The wattage you will need depends on 2 things. It's the size of your cage, well, 3 things. The species of the chameleon as well as the ambient temperature in your house. If you're a polar bear and you like it at 50 degrees in your house during the wintertime, you're going to need a stronger bulb as well as a nighttime bulb to keep the chameleon warm at night. But during the day, if you like it cooler, you're going to have to go with something like a 100-watt bulb, assuming that you have like an 1836 gauge. Or, a 100-watt. If you're like my wife and you would prefer the house at 75 degrees all the time, then you're probably going to be in the 50 to 75-watt range. You need a temperature with a... So like I was saying, to really drill down with the basking bulb size that you need 1 other item, maybe 2. You need something to tell you the temperature. If it's 60 degrees in your house, you want that basking spot to be in the high 80s, mid 90s, somewhere in there. You need a thermometer to tell you where it's at. I really like this one. This is a minimum maximum from ZooMed. So if you put this in there, it will tell you what is the hottest temperature it's been, what's the lowest temperature it's been. You also need humidity probe in there. So this one's really nice because it tells you both the humidity as well as the temperature. So, this is a good 1-2 combo. These right here are the old standby, the analog ones. We sell a ton of these, even though we recommend the digital ones. This is the old school technology. You get 1 stick and you can't move it, but with those ones with the probes, you can move them all over the cage. It's a much better product if you get it from us, or no matter where you get it. It's a good way to spend $2 or $3 extra. My opinion of these, don't use them. When it comes to temperatures and humidity in general, though it will vary upon the species, I'm going to throw out some blanket statements and say, basking spot, you want it to be, I'm going to say 90 degrees, thereabouts in the basking spot. Ambient temperature, mid 70s, low 80s would be perfect. Mid 70s, more so perfect. And you really don't want it to get lower than 60s. Exceptions to all of those, but those are some good guidelines for you to use. Humidity, we'll say no less than 50%. Probably 60 to 70% is a little more ideal. If you have a montane species of chameleon, that'll go up. If you have a more arid, like a veiled, it can be more tolerant of lower humidity conditions. Speaking of humidity, These are the products that you will use to regulate and maintain the humidity for your chameleon. Things like the Repti-Rain Mist King, bless you, Repti-Rain Mist King, and the Monsoon System from Exoterra are great but it will also allow your chameleon to drink. And then the Reptifogger, and the Repti-Cooler are the two products that are pretty much specifically just humidity. These are just, humidifiers that work great. If you take this Reptifogger and pair it with just a timer, that's a really good combination so that you can have that go on and off throughout the day and not have it just run, because this has an on-off setting as well as the intensity, but there's no like interval control with this. So the Zoom It has other products that you can pair with it to make it more kind of autonomous, and you don't have to fiddle with it other than filling up the bottle. And also, fun hack for this, the fitting that fits on the bottle, you can use one of those 1 liter soda bottles to give you. The last few things that we need to touch base on are watering, supplementation, and food. Chameleons don't drink from bowls. Some people might have different opinions on that, but typically they will not drink from a bowl. It's kind of like, that scene in Jurassic Park where he's waving the flare, he throws it, then he holds still. That's kind of what chameleons do. They have to have a source of moving water for them to really recognize it and drink from it. The misting will provide that, but it's also a good idea to have a dripper of some sort. These are simple and inexpensive. You can get one for $9. You could even DIY one of these. All it is a reservoir with a little, valve on it, and that will allow you to drip slow, consistent drips throughout the day. In our store, we do have little cups that catch this water, but because we drip our chameleons twice a day, if we didn't do that, the cages would just be full of water and it would be a pain in the butt to clean. So we will drip from this off the foliage in the tank or in the screen cage into a catch cup, and then we just empty the catch cup. Some people get really paranoid about the chameleon drowning in the catch cup. They're not that silly. They'd be able to help themselves. But if you have concerns about that, put a stick in there, problem solved. Let's talk about supplements. Supplementation. Here are my two favorite supplements for when it comes to chameleons. This can be a video all in itself, just for chameleons. Lots of strong opinions out there. Nobody's wrong if it works for you. My favorite is the Repashy Calcium Plus. It's my favorite because it has multivitamins, calcium, as well as trace amounts of D3. Well, trace amounts of multivitamin, trace amounts of D3, and calcium all in one jar. You can get all of those things separate and supplement your food separately, but when it's in just one jar, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. This is a good supplement for something like a veiled chameleon, a panther chameleon, big, robust, chameleons that are not overly montane. And when I say montane, that means like high in the mountains in like a rainforest where it's cloudy and raining all the time. That is montane. Thankfully, they have Repashy Calcium Plus Low D for those more montane species that are not basking all the time, like your veils and your panthers and your semi-arid types of chameleons. So if you have a chameleon like Jackson's chameleon, Parsons chameleon, Honelli, things like that, the Calcium Plus with Low D is probably a better option for you. That is food. What do you feed your chameleon? The answer, bugs. One thing that I always tell people when they're taking home anything that eats insects is that, if you get a pet reptile, chances are you're going to have pet bugs. You have to think of your food items as pills. You want to treat those crickets as a pill that you fill full of healthy things so that your chameleon is then eating healthy things as well. So that would be good for anything that eats insects. But crickets, dubia roaches, superworms, hornworms, silkworms, if they're small, flightless fruit flies, feed all of those insects healthy things so that then they are healthy for your animal. Don't forget to dust them. with those Repashy products. I dust them every day. You know, you could skip 1 or 2 days a week. But other than that, that's really all you need to know about chameleons. Bonus content we'll talk about for a second, maybe some troubleshooting. So this chameleon right here, he's really dark. It is probably about 8 o'clock in the morning here. We just turned the lights on and everybody's warming up. So chameleons have color chromatic skin. They're not a, you know, it doesn't work that they change their color to match whatever they are standing behind. Chameleons are like a living mood ring / solar panel. So their color change is a lot more indicative of what mood they're in or what they're trying to do as an animal. So this animal right here is dark. That means he's kind of cold. We just turned the lights on. He's turned his colors all the way down so it's dark. So he'll be able to absorb the warmth from that bulb and kind of get up to operating temperature. You know, reptiles are kind of like a diesel engine. They got to get warm, and then they'll be able to function really well. So if you have an animal that's really dark in the middle of the day, you know, be aware that something might be the matter. He might be unhappy. Maybe there's a stress out there. Maybe he's just unhappy that he can see another chameleon, or just, you know, whatever potential reason there. Check that out. See what might be ailing him. Other issues that chameleons have, if they're sunk in, like this veiled chameleon right here, looks great, has great body weight, looks very healthy. You know, just looks pudgy is a good way to put it. You know, chameleons should look kind of healthy, have good weight on them. If their eyes are sunk in and are not kind of bugging outside of their head, then you might have an issue, probably more so a humidity problem. So just make sure that your chameleon looks like this guy right here. This is an Ankarami panther chameleon, also known as the pink panther. So if it doesn't have you know, caps at the top of their head that look nice and flush and full of humidity, water, fat, all that good stuff, whatever, then they might be a little dehydrated. Consider upping your humidity as well as upping your hydration. The last thing we'll talk about is veterinary care. It's always good to have a vet nearby, or know of a vet nearby that is, you know, experienced in reptiles. And just because a vet is experienced in reptiles doesn't necessarily mean that they're experienced with chameleons. Chameleons are a little unique. The thing about chameleons is really that they're so good at camouflage and hiding that they really don't show any ailment until it's pretty advanced. So you need to have a vet nearby to be able to take your animal to, because, well, by the time you know that your chameleon's sick, it's usually pretty sick. So you need to have somebody that knows what they're doing to help get the chameleon back on track and give it some medication and maybe just help them out, get them back to where they're happy camping. So with all that being said, there is your chameleon basics. Pretty much every aspect of that we could drill into a lot more detailed. If you have questions on any of that, feel free to comment below. We'll get to it. Have some civilized discussion amongst yourselves. Disagree with me, but that is typically what works here. And I encourage you to take the information that I've given you, as well as anybody else on the internet or the forums or whatever you cool kids do these days, and your Twitters and your Instagrams and your Facebooks and what's the other one? Twitter. TikTok, that one. The Tic Tacs out there. Get out there and just really, you know, take in that information and find what works best for you. Again, chat with NatureBox Pet Emporium. Subscribe to the channel. Comment below. We'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.